You're surprised I did it?
No, I'm glad you did.
Perfect.
Well, explain, thank you.
Yep, it says it's recording, so we are all good.
Oh, so that's Jamie, right?
And can you hear us all okay?
Yes.
We can. Can we turn that up a little bit?
Mhm.
I can hear you fine.
I will keep
As loud
talking
as
a
it
little
gets
bit
on
if
that
somebody
screen.
wants to turn it up, or does it seem loud enough?
It is a bit quiet. If there's any way that you can adjust your mic volume, that would be helpful.
I don't know. Can we?
Katie,
not-
did you say that it's all the way up on the computer?
Yes.
Okay. What about,
Hmm.
there's also a separate speaker that has like a little roto dial on it. Is that all the way up as well? It's black.
Keep talking.
Stacy, say something.
Should I sing a song for everybody?
That would be
It's kind
great.
of embarrassing, but I will.
That would be wonderful.
As long as they
that
can't
better?
hear it.
That
Do
is
it
much
when they
better.
can't hear it. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right, well, let's call our meeting to order here. This is our Personnel Committee meeting, and it is January 9th, 2023, and our time is 5:33. And the first thing that we are going to be discussing today, and I will turn this over to Mike, we're going to be talking about change with regard to teacher contracts. And go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. Relative to replacing somebody mid-year during the school year, it has become so much more a challenge than what it was a handful of years ago, but especially a decade ago. It takes us, a lot of times you have to look at who can we get in there to sub for a while. Are we fortunate enough to find somebody to either bring on with a regular contract or a temporary contract? Just, it's a lot more work today than it was a decade ago or even sooner. In addition to that, what I've experienced since I came to Manitowoc is about 3 different employees, maybe even 4, I think it's 4 now with the latest one, that when they give notice, they're giving us about 2 weeks notice. And when you have professional employees and you have to replace a professional employee, 2 weeks notice is nowhere near sufficient enough. If it was a support person, an hourly person, that's a very standard 2 weeks notice it's the norm. So what I would be proposing to the personnel committee is upping the penalty a tad bit and implementing a 30-day notice right in their contract. So for example, I'll just run through these. June 15th, so if somebody signs their contract between May 15th and June 15th. And typically that's what happens because we issue contracts by statute by June 15th. If they resign prior to June 15th, the penalty would go from $500 to $750. $750, a little bit more of a pinch, not a lot, but we still have 2 months to find somebody. If they resign after August 1st, it goes from $750 to $1,000. It's getting much more difficult to find somebody to put in that seat on that bus. If they resign after school starts, typically September 1st, it would go from 1,000 to 1,500 because now it becomes much more problematic. But here's the real difference. After school starts, with less than a 30-day notice, I would propose we go to a $2,000 penalty. So if they give us a 30-day notice, it stays at the 1,500. But if they don't give us the 30-day notice, like these 2-week notice situations, they pay a little higher penalty. They pay the penalty of $2,000 or $500 more dollars. I think we need to impress upon the professional staff that if you're going to leave us during the school year, you owe it to us, to give us at least a 30-day notice in order for us to replace you or to find an adequate situation for our students. And obviously, if we were to find a replacement earlier and they wanted to leave earlier, we would accommodate that. There's no reason not to. So thoughts.
Okay.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah, do we want to do a motion?
Yep, we'd have, because I want to take it to the board meeting on the 25th of January. So we'd have to have a motion to move it forward.
I'll make the motion to move it forward.
And we need a second.
We have a motion by Matt.
Yeah, I'll second it. Sure.
Okay, Carrie will second that. Is there any discussion?
Is this fairly standard, Mike?
Is this?
I mean, around the state?
Yes. Relative to the penalty, I also had the Jim Macy, our legal counsel, look at it because your penalty has to be in proportion to the amount of work it takes to replace that person for the organization. And I wanted to make sure that we were on solid ice with that. So I asked Jim Macy to look at this, and I said, are we being reasonable? And he said, yes, we're being reasonable. So I feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
It's reasonable. If they give us a 30-day notice, the most it is $1,500. That's pretty reasonable. But if they don't give us the 30-day notice, then it costs them a little bit more because they put us in a bind. They put our students in a bind. It's just they need to give us enough time to take care of business so we can take care of our students.
Sure. Okay.
Mike, one of the questions, and I addressed this with you before, but just to put it on record, was current contracts. There were some concern that if we were going to do this with current contracts, can you just say for the record when this would begin?
Yes, thank you for that, Stacy. So I would see this being implemented as of February 1st. Now, what that means is that if we had somebody leave us mid-year here and we hired somebody February 5th, February 10th, March 1st, they would have a contract with this language in their contract. For those teachers who have all signed a contract from May 15th all the way through the end of January, this new language will not affect them until they sign next year's contract. Of course, that would be between May 15th and June 15th. So we're not changing anybody's current contract language. Only when they sign a new contract would it have the new contract language.
Okay, any further discussion or questions for Mike about that?
Nope, that would be my only concern, is that we're not adjusting any current contract.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Mike, looks like we can take that to the full board.
Okay. All right.
then our next item is just some follow-up information regarding the School to Work program. And Mike, I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
Okay. At our last personnel committee meeting, we talked about the School to Work program and had an example of how much the program has grown over the years. And out of that discussion last month came some other discussion regarding the program, such as what kind of guidelines, what kind of standards are involved in this program, and how do we know this program is meeting the needs of our students, and that sort of stuff. So I met with Bonnie and Ashley, the two people that are the coordinators of the program, and I learned, which I didn't know because I've been a middle school guy, principal and an HR guy, so this is more of a high school type thing. But what I didn't know was that with the youth apprenticeship program, all the student learning is guided by on-the-job learning performance standards, and these standards have been developed and provided by the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. So, and these guidelines contain general employability skills, industry-specific skills that each student must demonstrate proficiency by the end of the school year. And the skills have checklists that the employers have to check off on these students, and the coordinators make periodic contacts to the employers to make sure that everything is going well. So that was comforting to find out that there are those standards to this program. In addition, I talked with Lee Tennis and asked him about the program. Lee Tennis is the principal, obviously, at Lincoln High School. But Lee said that in his 6 years of overseeing the program as a high school principal, he has yet to have a concern or a complaint relative to the program. However, he did say that there have been a few students that have been dismissed from the program because they weren't a good fit. There have been some students that have been disciplined in the program by the employer, which is all part of the growth. It's all part of the program. And if your punctuality is not good, or if your attendance is not good, or your soft skills are lacking, I mean, that's all part of this program where you're trying to develop and grow these young adults so that they're more job ready when they get out of these programs. Bonnie and Ashley did give me some examples of industry-specific skills relative to an engineering drafting program that they had to interpret technical drawings, develop 3D view models, dimension drawings, use of measuring devices accurately. They had some examples of general employability skills that all students must develop. They had to set goals for the students and to set goals for improvement, communicating effectively, demonstrating integrity, and collaborating with others. So I guess what I learned was that there's some guidelines and standards to the program, which I think was somewhat of a concern coming out of our last meeting. Any thoughts? Any questions?
Mike, do you know, and I know Katie, maybe you'd be able to answer this too, since you had been at the high school. Is there if a student is not doing well academically in their gen ed courses, almost like what we do in sports, would they not be able to participate in their apprenticeship?
Yes, part of the progress monitoring part or component of the School to Work program, and it is just like we call our student athletes, it's School to Work, because the student and school component is the priority. There's a progress monitoring component. So students do, not only do they participate in workplace evaluations, but there's a school evaluation and monitoring that's part of that. So anybody that's not performing, making progress, has poor attendance. There's very consistent communication between the employer and Bonnie and Ashley's office to make sure that we get school on track before they're before the employability piece takes over.
Is there any involvement or a blessing, at least, from
Okay,
from the,
perfect.
from the AFL trade unions, the trade unions that apprenticeships are taken in?
Mike, do you have an answer to that, or do you want me to speak to that again?
I would really like you to speak to that, Katie.
Yes, so because our apprentice especially in the trades, also work through coursework through LTC, it is all
Okay.
they're all accredited and supported by those trade organizations.
Okay.
Katie, is there any are there any qualifications relative to, you need to have a 2.0 grade point average overall to apply for a youth apprenticeship program? Is there anything like that, or how does that process work?
I'm looking at Amber Fox Brewer in the audience. No, I don't believe there's a specific GPA requirement, but you must be on track for graduation and good course standing. Attendance must be good. So there's not a specific GPA requirement. I just didn't want to say that confidently without speaking confidently.
Mhm. Okay.
I have a question. Is everything called youth apprenticeship now, or is it work study as well, or or work to school to work, or what's the program? Is there variations in the program?
Yep, there are two separate programs.
Okay, so I think
youth
that's the point.
apprenticeship.
I think this is an important point to clarify here, because there is two different programs that run. One would be called youth apprenticeship, and one would be called work study. That is correct, right?
School to work, yep.
School to work.
Schools of work, yeah.
So obviously the requirements are different. That would be correct as well, right?
Yes, a youth apprenticeship is an elevated work experience opportunity for students. It comes with some more connection to the employers, some requirements for out of school, some additional training out of Lincoln High School, and because it is something that is in preparation, very closely in preparation for post-secondary opportunities. It's definitely, there's more meat to that than the work experience
So
program.
I just don't want to let everybody see the rope-a-dope, because there's two different programs. Because there's one that's a youth apprenticeship, Carrie,
Yeah. Okay.
one that's work to study. So there's tools for both of them. However, maybe one of the complaints you heard or whatever, or somebody heard, I don't know who did, but they could have been intertwined with both of those programs. So I just want to be clear that when somebody shows us just youth apprenticeship, that's obviously connected to LTC, probably, for sure. And then the work to study is not. So if we had issues, it could have been from the work to study, because the rigor is a lot less with that program. In some aspects, we'll say, but I just want to clarify that so everybody understands what we're talking about.
Okay, that's a good distinction. I mean,
Thanks, Matt. Okay, well, I appreciate, Mike, you looking into that and giving us just some more information about the standards.
okay.
Okay, and our next item here is Monroe Elementary School. There is a request for special education, a para staffing request, and we do have a link to that in board book. But Mike, if you want to talk a little bit about that, or turn that over to Katie, whichever you prefer.
Well, I'll do a little bit, and then Katie, you can also help me along here a little bit, Katie. So currently over at Monroe Elementary School, we have a student in kindergarten who was just evaluated for special education, the criteria. He's a student. This is a student with autism. And this student has qualified for special education. And the least restrictive environment requires that the student have a one-on-one support from a paraprofessional. And I'll just read this one sentence that Katie has in her. Since the student has met the criteria for special education staff are required to implement specifically designed instruction support per the student's IEP. The student requires one-on-one support in order to participate in daily social and functional activities. Katie, do you want to add anything to that situation request?
Thank you, Mike, and thank you again for the mid-year opportunity to propose some additional staff to support our students. So this student is new to Monroe Elementary this year, and staff quickly learned that this student would require significant amount of support in order to be successful in the classroom environment. So they had allocated one of their general education instructional aides primarily to support this student, knowing that they would be quickly moving through the evaluation process, which in its entirety can take up to 90 days. So it can be a lengthy process. So they had allocated this one-on-one person already from a general education perspective. And then when that IEP team met, criteria was discussed, and he did meet the criteria as having educational autism. The team determined that without this one-on-one support, there would be no way that they would be able to meet his needs in the general education environment. And he has made some pretty significant gains, which is great.
Katie, one question that I had was, well, let me stop there first before we do a discussion. Is there a motion and a second to advance this new position to the full board?
Absolutely. I'll make the motion. It's necessary.
Second.
Okay.
Mayor, I
So
don't see where we have a choice, do we?
So, so discussion, if you, do we have a choice for something?
Not really, but I do appreciate this opportunity because, I know in conversation with Angela and now in conversation with Jamie, we really are going to pursue some proactive opportunities. So we're not having to bring some of this to you mid-year, so that we are in advanced planning for some of these situations that are beyond our control or that we can't necessarily anticipate, but we can, I think, from a financial perspective or budgeting perspective, make some future plans that would be a little bit more proactive than having to go through this process, which, similar to covering for a teacher who resigns mid-year, when we have a process similar to this and the need to hire a sub to cover to meet the needs of students in the interim, it does become a lengthy process, and it does probably in the long run cost us a little bit more to do things that way as opposed to being a little bit more proactive. So our goal for next school year would be to have some options available to us where we have already planned for, knowing that these mid-year things come up. And then in the event that they don't, great.
Yeah. Everywhere I've been, I'm sorry, Stacy, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Well, everywhere I've been, there's always been up to a handful of special education situations that have unfolded where we needed to either increase hours, increase FTEs. It just happens because when you go into the school year, you staff accordingly, but you have no way to know this student's going to qualify. These students are coming into the district from outside the district. You just have no way to qualify or predict all that stuff. So those things just happen. The other thing I wanted to say too was that, relative to this situation, and I'm not proposing this, but I'm just going to, you do have an option. If indeed you said no to us, that we're not taking this to the full board, Well, then we'd have to rob Peter to pay Paul. That's what I call it, robbing Peter to pay Paul. We'd have to find somebody else within that building. We'd have to pull
Yeah.
that person from other students. And these other students then would get the attention and the education support they need, because this student would demand a full FTE. So it's best that we can move forward with supporting this one student and not affecting the other students, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And just to give you a little data, we take a random sample every so often of our transfer-ins, and between October 1 and last week Friday, we are at 86 students in to special education in our school district that are transferring in from outside that we did not identify as having a disability, and we are 56 students out.
Wow.
So we're plus 30 just students with disabilities from outside school districts. So just to give you an idea of, you know, and that's just in the last few months. So.
And the thing about that, Katie, is that with a net 30 students increase in special education, we've been able to, given we're a pretty big district and hopefully that maybe they're spread out a little bit, but the bottom line is we've been able to accommodate those students' needs, educational needs, without adding any special education FTE, to my knowledge, correct?
Yep. Sorry, we're just talking about some funding side conversation. My apologies.
All right.
Okay, well, we have a motion in the second to move this. I always forget that we don't have to vote on it here. But we have a motion in a second to move that to the full board for any further discussion and a final vote. So if there's no other discussion on this, we will go ahead and have that moved over to the, and I'm supportive of it as well, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and then our final item that we have
Yeah.
that we're going to be talking about tonight is the 3K and 4K students, our early childhood, Riverview Early Childhood program. And we do have a link to that as well. And if, Mike, if you want to start and have Katie or Jamie chime in about that would be great.
Okay. So early childhood, Riverview Elementary School. We've, speaking about additional students, we've had an influx of 20 3- and 4-year-olds into the programming at Riverview Elementary School, early learning program, since the start of this school year. The thing that not only have we had an increase of 20 students in 3K and 4K, but we also reduced a 4K FTE teaching position going into this year. So we see it as critical relative to getting these 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds up to speed academically so they're ready for kindergarten, because when they get into kindergarten, we want to move forward and and grow them as fast as we can and as much as we can. So these 20 students, we need some more support in there to get them ready for 5K. Katie, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Obviously early intervention plays a significant role in the future success of our students, especially those with disabilities. So an opportunity, I don't know, I wasn't part of staffing conversations last year to know the rationale and reduction of a full-time teaching FTE from last school year. I'm assuming there was some lower enrollment and they thought they could get by. But in conversations with Heidi Schroederis throughout the last couple of months, they've exhausted internal opportunities at Riverview from other programs to support the needs of these youngest learners, and there's a lot of self-care and many daily living skills and supports that go into supporting our 3- and 4-year-olds, as I'm sure you can imagine. Many come to us without having consistent potty training abilities and all sorts of things. So providing some additional support will, like Mike said, help with that readiness as students approach kindergarten. And then I did link, without the names of students, just the data, the ages, whether or not they are speech and language only students. Obviously that impairment area requires less support than some of our other special education impairment areas. A very common one is SDD, which stands for significant developmental delay. And that, requires anywhere from early academic readiness skills to more functional school skills, behavioral skills, those types of things.
So speech
Yeah.
means they need support in speech.
Just speech, yeah. So they would meet with a speech and language pathologist.
And new 2022, 23 just means that they're,
Students with other disability categories, yeah. That we were not anticipating prior to the start of the year.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second
Yeah,
to
I'll
move that
I
position through?
move that we recommend this to the board. Yeah.
I'll second that, Carrie.
All right.
Okay, is there any further discussion or regarding that, or any other questions that you might have? I do have one. One of the things that I'm curious about is, and I believe this fits in with what we're talking about, is why 20 students at Riverview? Is there any way, would it make a difference? And I'm assuming not, but maybe just to help me understand, if 20 students want to go to Riverview and we don't have the capability FTE there, is it possible to cap schools for our programming and send them to another school that has a lower enrollment?
We currently do not offer special education programming for 3 and 4-year-olds at any other building. Our early childhood center is still housed at Riverview.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
did you look at the numbers at the YMCA and Lake Shore and see if they fluctuated, or did they not? Can you see a correlation of the enrollment that it moved to Riverview, or did you not?
No, but I can. That would be.
Because that's something that we, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because if the enrollment was still there, it just, they know that there's special needs, so they are going to Riverview now because the YMCA or Lakeshore Cap isn't. But if there is still numbers at the YMCA and Lakeshore Cap as normal, that would indicate that we have enrollment up instead of just a movement.
I can do some enrollment checking on those programs.
The other
And
thing I
then
would
the night of the board meeting, Katie, if you just want to add that,
Yep,
that'd
absolutely.
be great. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Well, the other thing too is that as these 3-year-olds and these 3K and 4Ks they enroll in 4K and 5K next year, depending on where the numbers are at, this position could be one that's mainly for this next semester. And then if those students move on to 4K and 5K, then this position will ultimately, we always have needs as paras in special education. So this position would end up folding in somewhere else where we have a need, somebody left, resigned, retired, something of that nature. You know, but as Katie said, you know, if we maintain these high numbers, well, then that position will stay there, obviously.
The other thing I was just curious about is, do our other programs, our early other childhood programs that are in the community, do they, if they see a child that has some special education needs, will they refer them over to Riverview, and that would decrease their census if they didn't know that coming in?
There will be referrals in our 4K programs community-wide that do occur throughout the school year. We do have some staff members that provide services in some of our other daycare sites in Manitowoc, YMCA being one of them. So that wouldn't
Okay.
necessarily mean that that student would transfer to Riverview. But our 3-year-olds receiving special education services in the community do have to go to Riverview.
Okay. Perfect.
I have one follow-up question.
Okay, well, yes.
Mike, how is the retention or, I know you haven't been in the job that long, but how is the hiring for the paraprofessionals for special ed? Have you been able to fill those positions quickly? Or how are you doing with that?
We've been doing pretty well. We've had our fair share of positions. There's no doubt about that. But I think we've been with Indeed. Indeed really helps us connect with potential candidates. And so far, we've been pretty fortunate. I'm not aware of any situation where we have like 0 candidates and we have vacancies. So far, so good. And the same thing with the teaching situation. We've had a few vacancies that semester, but we've been very fortunate. And for the most part, we've found some good quality people to fill these roles at mid-year, which I feel pretty dang good about. With the market like it is, the teaching market and the labor market like it is. So feel pretty good about things, to be very frank with you.
We found some wonderful, very new to education educators, and so we'll be running a paraprofessional staff development opportunity on the 20th of February, which is not our most upcoming staff development day, but our next one, to catch some of our new staff members with the goal of giving them, building their capacity, building their toolbox for working with some of our challenging students, really just with the goal of retaining them. And
Consistency.
yeah, I mean, and we, like Mike said, we found some really quality people this time of year. And our goal would be to support them so they feel good about the job that they're doing and they can really effectively meet the needs of our kids. So.
Excellent. Well done.
Thank you all again for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate the support of some of our students with some significant needs. And it's great to have this opportunity. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, that is the end of our agenda. If there's nothing else to come before the committee, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
And I'll second.
Okay. And that means that we are concluded at 6:09 p.m. And everyone have a great evening.
Good. See you tomorrow.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank you. Yep. See you tomorrow, guys.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.